Passaris Park, a place you and I know well. By day, by the shade of the trees surrounding the park, people frolic, people play, unsuspecting, unaware. By night, that's when she comes out to begin her hunt. There's the soft fragrance of French pine in the air, and light feminine laughter in the distance. A baby cries. A dog howls. The noises get quieter, softer, and then you spot her. Under the full moon, she's a vision in white. Long hair, pale skin, and dark nails. The sweet whiff of flowers suddenly smells a lot like the stench of rotten flesh. That's when she grabs you. Nails sink into your skin. The last thing you will ever know. Got scared? That was the legend of the Pontianak, the supposed ghost of a pregnant woman who died during childbirth. She is said to roam Passaris Park pretty frequently. Throughout the years, ghost stories and urban legends have been told to terrify children, frighten the weak of heart, and amuse those looking for a good scare. But why do we like being scared? Doesn't it seem a little counterintuitive? After all, it's not nice to be in a constant state of anxiety all the time. Trust me, I know. There are a number of theories on why we like being scared. The most generally accepted one is that we like fear because it fills us with adrenaline, which makes us feel good. There's a theory by scholar Noel Carroll which essentially boils down to humans are highly counterproductive creatures who will do anything to satisfy their curiosity, even if it means taking part in things that are bad for them. The Greek philosopher Aristotle hypothesized that it could be a form of catharsis, where we purge or release our negative emotions and feelings about the world. This theory is further supported by the dispositional alignment theory, which states that we like watching horror and horror films because in the end, we want the bad guys to be killed. The one most relevant for today is one I like to call change is scary. A theory by cultural historian DJ Scal, it essentially states that horror movies are a reflection of our society's fears about changing realities, making them relatable to us. According to Scal, if a filmmaker follows the structure of the dispositional alignment theory, while making the plot of the film relatable to current times, it makes the film infinitely satisfying for the audience, as during the climax, the resolution, we are literally watching our current fears get resolved in front of our very eyes. In that way, horror movies offer a really nuanced and often hopeful perspective for the audience. To further investigate this, why don't we take a trip back in time? Over 60 years ago, to be precise. The 1954 film Godzilla is, in short, about Japanese authorities reacting to a nuclear monster. While later versions of Godzilla are a bit more like action movies, the original Godzilla was undoubtedly a horror movie that followed Scal's theory. In fact, when it was first released, it was deemed too relatable. People took offense at the perceived commercialization of the devastation Japan had undergone due to World War II, particularly because the Daigyo Fukurumaru incident, where a Japanese tuna fishing boat was found to be contaminated by nuclear fallout from Bikini Atoll, had happened just 8 months prior. There are many points in the film that relate to the viewers of the time. The most obvious one is the nuclear monster Godzilla. Godzilla itself is an example of fears differing between nations. What's popular in horror typically differs from country to country because, well, Experiences are different. However, within countries themselves, there are certain experiences that could be considered universal. In the case of Godzilla, while in America, radiation creates superheroes like Spider-Man, in Japan, it's monsters it creates. This is because both countries have different narratives relating to nuclear fallout. Another fear that Godzilla tackles is the fear of the old being replaced by the new. After World War II, when the Emperor renounced his divine power and Japan came under American occupation, many people were dissatisfied with the stark movement of Japan's political and societal landscape. After the dual voice broadcast in which the Emperor announced their decision to surrender, a crowd gathered out in front of the Imperial Palace in Tokyo and cried. In the words of author John Dower, their tears reflected a multitude of sentiments: anguish, regret, anger, bereavement, anger at having been deceived, sudden emptiness, and a loss of purpose. As they say, life imitates art, and art imitates life. This loss of purpose can be seen no better than in Japan's media landscape in the coming years. Many movies became focused on the past, like Rashomon, Ugetsu, and Gates of Hell, highly introspective, like Ikiru and Record of a Living Being, or just plain depressing, like The Bad Sleep Well and Tokyo Story. In particular, the return to the shogunate era felt a dissatisfaction in many for the industrialization Japan had previously undergone, as many found that to be the source of their problems. Godzilla best exemplifies this fear through the contrast in the scientist characters in the film between Kyohei Yamane and Daisuke Serizawa. Yamane is a scientist through and through. His primary aim to study Godzilla, despite it being a destroying monster. In contrast, Serizawa is a bit more restrained, a bit more aware of the consequences of his actions. He's reluctant throughout the film to even use his innovation, the oxygen destroyer, to kill Godzilla, fearing that it could be the catalyst for an arms race between powerful nations. After World War II, when the Emperor announced his decision to surrender, many Japanese Army and Navy officers committed suicide, unwilling to live under the dishonorable mark of surrender. In a way, Serizawa could be read as an allegory to them. So determined he is to stick to his ideals and not let his weapon fall into the wrong hands, he ends up destroying his notes and killing himself. Now, Serizawa's death and Godzilla's ending may give you the idea that innovation, bad. After all, yeah, sure, the oxygen destroyer kills Godzilla, but its inventor is dead by the film's ending, and Godzilla itself is the byproduct of innovation. This would have been a highly appropriate message in an era where innovation brought about numerous casualties. However, through the character arc of the ever-curious Yamane, the film suggests that innovation may not be so bad if we are aware of its price. Yamane starts out the film hardcore dedicated to science, pushing for progress no matter the casualties it brings. He ends the film a little more worldly and a little more humbled, respecting Serizawa's sacrifice, but never truly giving up his curious edge, as can be seen from the subsequent Godzilla movies he appeared in. With this, the film suggests that innovation may not be so bad if we are aware of its price. Moving on from Godzilla, many of you might have heard of the classic 1975 hit, Jaws. I know what some of you might be thinking. Jaws is a thriller, isn't it? Yeah, well, the thriller and horror genres are kind of overlapping. I mean, they both use tension, but horror uses it to get to a point of climax where the hidden evil is revealed, whereas thriller uses it to maintain a spooky and sometimes mysterious atmosphere. In the case of Jaws, there's no hidden evil. There's a shark killing people, That's it. That's the movie. Pack it up and go home. However, it does use some elements of horror, such as gore, and its atmosphere is more mysterious, is more terrifying as opposed to mysterious. It also follows Scout's theory to a T, depicting the struggles that those in its country of 1970s America would have faced during this time. A little about the background of Jaws. Jaws is based on a novel by American author Peter Benchley, written just a year before the release of the movie. And while now it's known as the American summer blockbuster, at the time of its release, it was actually known as the Watergate movie. On June 2nd, 1972, 5 men working to re-elect President Richard Nixon broke into the Democratic Party's headquarters at Watergate. They got caught, and in the subsequent trial that followed, one of the men wrote a letter to the judge, alleging that not only did White House and Republican officials know about the break-in, but they had paid the defendants to keep quiet. Eventually, all sorts of damaging evidence began to emerge, linking Nixon and the White House at large to the crime. Soon, the articles of impeachment against Nixon were adopted, and he resigned from office. The Watergate scandal rocked the nation at a period where they were already reeling from the Vietnam War. In 1973, just a year before he was impeached, Nixon signed the Paris Peace Accords, marking the end of American involvement in the Vietnam War. This was the first war that America had lost, and the first that really came into people's living rooms nightly, and such inspired widespread protests and movements. It led to over 60,000 American lives lost, and over 2 million Vietnamese ones. To top all of that off, there was also economic problems during this time, with the 1970s seeing some of the highest rates of inflation in recent US history. To put this concisely, not a good time to be American. How does this manifest in the film? Well, you might remember something about that gigantic man-eating shark the film is named after. I imagine it's pretty hard to forget. However, the shark isn't really the only villain in the film. We definitely can't discount the actions of Mayor Larry Vaughn, who seemingly donates his brain to charity for the course of the movie, if you ask me. The parallels between Nixon and Vaughn are many and direct. In the same way that Nixon tried to pressure those at the Watergate trial to lie, Vaughn pressures the coroner to lie about the death, saying it's a boating accident as opposed to a shark death. Now, the film also differs from the novel in one key way, introducing a new subplot. Out on the sea, Quint, part of the shark hunting trio, tells the other 2 members of the shark hunting trio that of the true story of the USS Indianapolis, a real ship in World War II that delivered the atomic bomb that was going to be dropped on Japan. On its voyage back, the crew of the ship suffered a similarly cosmic trial. Out on the sea, the boat was hit by a torpedo, and its crew were forced to abandon ship. Hundreds of men died in shark-infested waters. At a period where the U.S. was reeling from the effects of a war they had lost, the somber remembrance of the price that war brings, even for the victors, struck a chord in audiences. Looking at the shark hunting trio themselves, each of them is representative of a faction of their time. There's Quint, the physical symbol of the price of war. Hooper, the quintessential wealthy U.S. college boy, easily imaginable as part of the Vietnam War protests. Then there's Brody, a family man who's undoubtedly American, but also a man who values justice. Out of the 3, Quint could be said to be most representative of the past, the bloody wars, the casualties gained in them, and the guilt of those left behind. His sacrifice in the end not only vindicates him of the nuclear guilt he feels, but also posits the idea that war is not a solution. A man like Quint, who knows nothing but to fight, cannot survive in the future because the future should be one free of that. In the end, his sacrifice saves Hooper and Brody, who both represent the future. Interestingly, Hooper also dies in the novel, but in the film he stays alive. In the 1970s, many had a distrustful view of politicians, but in the end, we do need them to litigate and counsel for us. In a similar manner, many people in the town are rightfully afraid of the man-eating shark. However, Hooper embraces it with a sense of curiosity and purpose. In a way, this may suggest to audiences to not shy away from what they fear. The whole point of horror movies is to incite fear, to make us scared. Looking at both these films throughout the years, it's easy to see why they would have terrified audiences of their time. After all, they didn't just reflect physical fears, but more abstract, existential ones. However, at the end of the day, they all suggest messages of progress and hope. They say it is only natural to fear change, to be afraid of it. However, it is the only way to move forward, to change your reality for the better. Before I turn out the lights, I hope to leave you with one thing. By analyzing these films and knowing what makes them so scary to us, we can not only identify what we are afraid of, but how we can overcome that fear and move forward into a better day. Lights out.